Hi, lovelies. It's Lisadannielle, and you're watching Zoom After Dark. This week, Pastor Earnest Fitzhugh out of Phoenix, Arizona, shared with us false advertisement. Listen, you need to go get yourself some water and something to eat because this is some real tea, okay? And it was good. Everything was amazing. He shared so much wisdom, and I hope you enjoy it. Without further ado, Pastor Fitz. Well, officially, welcome to Lisadannielle After Dark. I am Lisadannielle, and I'm super excited about our talk tonight. Listen, I have somebody, you know my thing, right? Raw, real, relevant. That's what I'm all about. And I'm super excited about my guest. My guest, Pastor Fitz, Pastor Earnest Fitzhugh from Phoenix, Arizona, is with me tonight. He has been preaching since he was a teenager and is the founder and senior pastor of the Redemption Life Center in Phoenix, Arizona. He has been married to his beautiful wife, Lady Ray, and they parent 4 children together. And their first ministry, of course, is all about family. Please welcome Pastor Fitz. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate just being able to chat.
Just been able to chat. Listen, let me tell you something. So, fellow author to fellow author, let me just tell you that it would only be right that I would go and get your book to give it a little read. And the tea that is in your book. Listen, I'm all about transparent, but you said, listen, I'm snatching the door open. Everything's falling out. If you guys haven't gotten Pastor Fitz's book, I will make sure that in the video I show you what it looks like. I'll tell you where you can get it. I'm sure you can get it on Amazon. It's good. I think all of his products right now, he's got 2 books, a workbook and a normal book. Am I correct?
Yeah,
and they're under $10 right now, right?
Yes. Until tomorrow. Yeah.
Until tomorrow. So listen, get it tonight. But wow. So I'm super excited. Of course, you know that I wanted to talk tonight about false advertisement. You and I both have taken platforms about being what you expect and all of that good stuff. So the first thing I wanted to do is have you tell me why this subject, why this topic was so important to you.
Because I believe that it is the primary reason why there are so many issues in relationships, why there are so many struggles. Because there's a misrepresentation of who we really are. And I think that's the issue that a lot of times we don't talk about. So it's something that I wanted to attack on paper, something I wanted to attack, because I think we could change the narrative about relationships if we really got to the meat about who we advertise ourselves as.
Wow. Okay. And in your book, you highlight some moments where you were actually deceived or where you actually felt deceived. So can you just give us a little quick synopsis of that?
So there's one example in my book that I talk about, and I really discuss this area of when, and let me give this disclosure, I've been married more than once. So in a previous marriage, I discussed a dating transition in which I had met someone and everything was going great, godly, went to church, and in the beginning, I expressed some of the things that I was looking for in a spouse. And so I expressed that I really like someone who cooks, right? I'm very old school traditional. My mom cooked, throughout the week. Sundays we had big dinner, so that's very important to me. And so as a result of that, I shared that's something that I desired in a spouse. And so the first time that I was invited over, right, for dinner, she made my favorite meal. I still remember to this day, it was fried chicken, string beans, and it was white rice, and it was good. I was like, okay, I done found somebody who can cook. Now keep in mind, this is 8 years ago, and I still remember that's how important food is to me. So she did all these great things.
It was just white rice. So shout out to rice.
Listen, all I need is white rice and gravy. That's all I need.
Okay.
So she did that, and that was good to me. That was like one of my favorite, meal compositions, whatever. And so that was great. A year later, we get married, only to find out that really wasn't her habit. She actually liked to eat out more than she liked to cook. While we dated, she cooked, but I said that's what I wanted. But after we got married, in 7 years, she probably cooked 20 times. In 52 weeks, 20 times. And I mean 20 individual times in those 7 years. And that's not a negative, a reflection on them. That just wasn't her thing. And so I realized that sometimes when we're in this dating process, we present ourselves to be something. that we may not be. And I started to discover there are multiple reasons why we do that, right? And so that's why I wanted to write those things in my book.
Okay. And so you kind of touched on it a little bit. I want to talk about the thought behind it. Why do you think that people portray themselves in a light, right, that's completely different from who you actually move in with?
So in my book, I throw out this idea that we shouldn't give people the blueprint. And so when I say give people the blueprint, we shouldn't tell people how to capture our heart. And because most of us come up with this term, I'm dating with intent, right? I'm dating with purpose. We jump into a friendship level conversation, but we instantly start talking about what we want in a relationship, what we want in a spouse, what we want in a companion. And what that does is we begin to have intimate conversations about our desires, and we literally tell somebody how to get to our heart. So when we tell them, I want someone who's affectionate, I want someone who's good with kids, I want someone who's a God-fearing man, God-fearing woman, I want someone who cooks, cleans, I want someone who preaches, I want someone who prays. You literally told them everything they need to present themselves as to get your attention.
Now listen, you preach it right there, because let me tell you something. One of the things I told someone the other day, they said, I want to marry my best friend. And I said, that's good and all. But the problem with someone being your quote unquote best friend is that they learn you quickly, right? So they can then reflect what it is you say without that genuinely being who they plan to be for the remainder of your relationship.
Absolutely.
So then how do you address that? Like you're in the relationship, you're married, for a lot of people, I mean, you've had some pretty direct reasons why your marriages needed to end, right? So it wasn't chicken. Okay, let's just say that it wasn't chicken.
Right. Started with a CH. Go ahead.
Right, but what I'm saying is, so for those who have issues that are as small as, you said you like to cook, but you don't like to cook. How do we address that inside the relationship from a place of dignity, so the person doesn't feel attacked, but we still get our needs met?
So one of the things that I've learned is that sometimes our expectations weren't fair either. So let me give you a prime example.
Okay.
My parents, I had a two income household when I was growing up, right? So I've always seen my mother work and my father work. My mother would come home, she would cook. However, my father would also cook as well, depending on who got done first. So I wanted someone who would work and cook, but I didn't realize that when you have 4 kids instead of 2, it's a lot more work. Right. It's a lot more time consuming. And I realized that sometimes our expectations are based on what we've seen, but they're not based upon our own circumstances. Right. So I had this expectation of, I want you to cook and do that, but there wasn't an environment that was amicable for that to work. So in other words, if I have an expectation for you to cook every day, have I created the scenario or the environment for that to be possible? And unfortunately, in that season of my life, it wasn't. The lifestyle we lived required us both to work, overtime. So there was less time to take care of household duties, right? And so my expectations weren't fair. And so I believe you have to approach that conversation understanding that there are 2 elements. Is it that they don't want to do it, or is it that they're incapable of doing it because of circumstance? Because if we don't see it from both perspectives, we are liable to offend. If I'm only thinking about what I want, but I didn't address the fact that I haven't given you what you need to be successful, that's not their fault.
Okay, so then let's dive a little bit deeper into, I've met someone, I think they're wonderful. They're saying all the right things. They're doing all the right things. We get in the relationship and it's not what I thought. A lot of time, and let's say that relationship ends. A lot of times there is a point of retrospection, right? Where we look back and we say, you know what? There were red flags here. There were things that I could have seen that were deviations in their character, but I did not act upon it, or I did not recognize it. Can you say that you saw any of those things? And if so, what were they?
In my relationships, absolutely. In my relationships, and I'll share some of this. So my children's mom is with a woman now. Right. However, at that time when we met, I was 19, At that time when we met, I didn't pay attention to the fact that all of her friends were lesbians, right? And you know, I don't treat people different. It's, you know, regardless, you choose what you choose. But I never paid attention to the fact that all of her friends were lesbians, and they all hung around a lot. But it never in my mind had even calculated to there's a possibility of there's some familiarity, right? I just didn't care because, in all honesty, I was already enamored with the fact that that was somebody who was interested in me, because growing up, I didn't have anybody really into me like that. So I was already like, oh shoot, somebody want me. Okay, I'm good. Because I always wanted to get married young and always wanted to have a family. And that was my life plan. Be a preacher, have a family, you know, have a good job. I didn't pay attention to the warning signs because I was so consumed with what I wanted. I didn't pay attention to what I saw.
And then, okay, so let's go back, because you're saying to me, right? I'm hearing you. I've read the book, so I'm restating what you said. So here you are, you're in ministry, right?
Yeah.
Right? Because you're a lifer like me, right? You're a lifer, like you're in this thing for life. Okay. So you're already in ministry. You've now married a woman who has essentially decided that she wanted to marry a woman.
Mm-hmm.
And you can look back and see that her surroundings are a telltale sign that there may be something else that you're not recognizing. And so ultimately that ends. So take me to that transition from I'm in ministry, right? And let's just be honest, it's not welcomed for you to get a divorce.
Absolutely.
Right?
Not.
Divorce is absolutely a no-no. However, you get a divorce, and you're going how long before you're into another marriage? And is there ridicule in the transition, right? Do you have to deal with having to tell your church, like, this is not working?
Well, so at 19, and my father's a pastor, so at 19, you know, I was assisting him in ministry. She was there at the time. At 19, no one knew. In all honesty, I didn't even know how deep that lifestyle was running through. So when we had split up, it was just more of a, we weren't happy. I didn't have all the details or all the evidence of everything that was going on. It just was not working. So of course, when we got a divorce, and one of my biggest issues that I have with the church as a whole, right, the body as a whole, is we don't teach people how to go from having a warm bed to a cold bed, right? I was married from 19 to 24, and nobody taught me how to go from having sex to not having sex.
Okay. Right.
And that's just the real honest situation. So when you're used to having, you know, consistent relations, especially at that age, and then now you're going from that to nothing.
Right.
I didn't know how to cope. And because it's better to marry than to burn, right? I jumped from one relationship right to the next one because I didn't want to be in sin. I'm a preacher. I don't want to be in sin. I don't really have good control over this flesh, right? Because we're told what not to do, but we're never given mechanisms on how to avoid doing it. I know not to have sex. Tell me how not to. Right?
Right. Tell me how not to do something.
Yeah. Somebody stand in front of you. Yeah. Somebody stand in front of you with no clothes on. How do I not?
Right.
Tell me that, right? I'm good as long as I'm not in that scenario. But when those scenarios do come, and sometimes they come without plan. It's not like you plan it all the time, right? So in those scenarios where that temptation's there, and maybe it's different for you all, my church didn't teach me that.
No, it's not different for us.
They didn't teach us that, you know, Paul said.
Well, I can't speak for everyone. It's not different for the kid. The church didn't teach me that.
Paul said, flee youthful lust. Well, tell me how to do that when I'm in the house, door locked, in a room that is dark. Tell me how to leave.
Right.
Because this flesh got a mind of its own. And so because of that, literally, I found myself in another relationship within 6 months and got remarried. But I knew it was bad because I didn't want to tell nobody.
Okay, stop there. So stop there. We have a tendency, okay, to hide when we are about to do something. We know there is something in us. People can say 24 hours a day, I had no idea. You know when you're about to do something that's not in the will of God. And you said something that is so poignant for me. You said, I didn't want to tell anybody. I had a whole wedding and didn't invite my siblings. Okay, like
I didn't tell my parents.
Right. So you, right? My sister's on, so she's nodding. I had a whole wedding And I didn't tell. So talk about why I feel like when you know it's something you should not do, the people closest to you know you well enough to know you're not going to thrive. And I think there's a part of you that kind of goes a little crazy in the moment and says, I don't want to be told what I'm supposed to do. I want to figure it out later. What was your methodology when you were like, I didn't want to tell anybody? What were you thinking in the moment?
For me, the judgment about getting the divorce shut me down from communicating what my plans were. It wasn't just about it being wrong, but the way I was talked about and treated and judged just off of the divorce when people did not know the details, because I believe even if we're not together, my job is still to cover, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't care what you did to me, I'm going to always cover. I never told anybody her lifestyle, right?
Okay.
That's not my place to do.
Right.
So, and the only reason why I'm talking about it now is because, you know, she's with a basketball player, everybody knows. So, you know, that's neither here nor there, but I didn't tell her stuff.
Right.
So, but the way people treated me, and one of the hurtful things for me was, so I had got ordained at 20. And so before we divorced, my bishop met with us, and you know, a very prominent bishop in the Church of God in Christ. And he says, you know, son, you don't want another man raising your children. And in the back of my head, I'm thinking, it ain't gonna be no man, right? You don't want another man. You don't want another man raising your children. And his wife. At
this point, I'd be grateful if it was another man.
Right. But what really hurt me, what really set me back was his wife was like, you'll never be a good preacher. You will never pastor a church. Nobody will ever follow you. At 20 years old,
okay,
knowing what I knew, and I'm talking about, and I respected these people have been married 60 years.
Yes.
Knowing what I knew, for me, that's like, and that's why I'm not gonna tell nobody nothing.
And fifth, that judgment, right? So talk about that, because let me tell you, one of the things that we're talking about false advertisement, and I want to intentionally talk about it because not just as it relates to relationships, but sometimes in the body of Christ, we kind of do this bait and switch thing where we bring people in and we promise them their lives will be so much easier and so much better because they've met the Lord. And we don't tell them, but there might be a time when the enemy might try to get in that behind a little bit. You know what I mean? It's going to be worth it. Right. But there is going to be some trial. And so that judgment alone is reason for you to be like, you know what? I'm not doing this. I don't feel like dealing with it. I don't feel like the accountability, because when you should have loved me, right, you cast me out. So how do you get back to a place of reconciliation?
I first also think,
or willingness.
I think you have to know God for yourself too. At 20,
Absolutely.
2023, my relationship with God was completely different now. My understanding of grace was completely different now. I realized that leadership knew more about grace than they taught us, right? As you mature in your walk with Christ, you understand there is a whole different level of grace. We are saved because of grace. It's not because of our perfection. It's not because we do everything right. It's not because we dot every I, cross every T. We're not saved because of perfection, but it's because of salvation that we want to live right. You hear what I'm saying? Yeah. But I didn't know that for myself really deep down until I had grew. And so once I grew, it opened me up for reconciliation. But and I believe most people will agree, when you deal with that judgment, when you deal with that disconnect, it teaches you how to walk alone with God and nobody else. It teaches you how to hear God for yourself and nobody else. And I believe it almost can work to your good, because then when God calls you to do something different or calls you to do something out the norm, you can walk that road without needing support from everybody, right? Had I not gone through those things, there's no way I would do what I do now. I would still be wearing a clergy robe every Sunday and wearing a big collar every first Sunday. I wouldn't be the same man because I would need the approval of people. Right. So reconciliation came when I admitted my faults, admitted the parts that I played in it, and then had to own it up. I believe that when you get to a place to where you've really repented and you've really changed your direction, you can own up to the mistake. Yeah, and I used to tell people, when I got married that second time, I told people, this wasn't God, this was me. I chose this. And I understand that if he lets it work, it's going to be because of mercy, not because he mandated it.
Okay. So, I got so much to unpack from that statement right there, because listen, as we're in this walk with God, right? Of course, it's all about relationship. It's all about how we see ourselves in relationship with God, and that understanding that he wants us to come to him. He wants us to ask him, and we should be representation and telling people, you're going to make some mistakes, but we're not going to beat you over the head with your mistakes. This is a place where you can make mistakes, right? And we'll love you back to health. Going through something like that, like being in that station of, I'm just not willing to let them in, right? You go from serving in ministry, full of judgment, right? People are judging you because of this. Then you've gotten married the second time and you're like, if God lets it work. So you go into it knowing, and I'm saying this because I've done it. You go into it going, yeah, this probably ain't going to be
right what it should be.
What is there a level? Because I know for me, I went into a marriage that I knew God wasn't going to sanction so that I could hide from what I knew God called me to do. Is there any level of you that was fighting with your calling in the midst of dealing with all the people and approval addiction?
You know, I don't think so, because I went full steam ahead and I launched my first ministry. It was
so you were doing this in tandem.
Yeah,
so you were doing ministry this whole time and still going through all the.
So with my first divorce, and if y'all want to know how many times I've been married, read the book. After my first divorce,
read it.
After my first one, I realized I knew I had a call, but I launched my ministry 2010. I think it was the first time. And I knew that there was a real struggle with that relationship when she asked for a divorce the day I got installed as a pastor.
Okay.
So I'm on marriage number 2.
Right.
Getting installed as a pastor, as the youngest coaching pastor in Arizona, right, at 24 years old. That hadn't been done here yet. And in the parking lot after being installed, she said, I want a divorce. And I was like, wait.
The same day?
The same day, still in my church clothes.
Wow.
Because she didn't want to compete with the church.
Oh, okay. So take me back now. I'm gonna take you to a sticky area, and I know you can handle it, because I know you can handle it.
Yeah, you good.
So we're talking about false advertisement. This entire time you're going through all this privately, you're serving. How often are our leaders living one life, right? Look at your face. I know you know where I'm going, and it's a completely different life at home. And what effects does that have, not only on the leader, but on their families, right? And on their body?
I will say this. I was an alcoholic between 24 and 27. I mean, good alcoholic, like 2 bottles of Malibu rum every day after work, because that relationship was not God.
Yeah.
Because I'm trying to make that work while trying to do a ministry.
Yeah.
It wasn't growing. And for here in Arizona, you know, coaching is real heavy, all Black people, whatever. Well, I was trying to be different. I didn't want just all Black people. So we were already different dynamics. So we really didn't fit in there, struggling at home. I was a good alcoholic for like 3 years. And what's funny is that, you know, it was one of at that time, my wife's family members who said, I think you're an alcoholic. And I said, well, I don't get faded when I drink. So it was like, that's the problem. You drink so much that you don't even realize.
Right. If you drink so much that you don't get faded no more.
Right. But I didn't start drinking until that. I didn't start drinking until that relationship. Right. I had never drank until that relationship, but everybody in their family did. So when I tell you that being improperly positioned, right, puts you in a place on the brink of insanity, right? Yeah. Because your spirit knows what's right, but your flesh is still trying to maintain a position that God did not call you to, right? Yeah. And I still believe that God allows you to choose your spouse, but he gives you parameters in which you're supposed to choose them, right? And when you choose outside of those parameters, that's when you have the problem.
Got you.
Right? And so I was losing my mind. And it wasn't until I got to a place to where I stopped trying to fight to make it work that my mind started coming back. And I was like, you know what? Do what you want to do. Right. But I can say that sometimes we try to overcompensate with church work when our spirit ain't right. Your spirit can be messed up and you try to overcompensate with busy work at church.
Yeah.
And so you can be bleeding in your messages and not even realize it.
Yeah. And unfortunately, the parishioners do realize it.
They do.
Right?
Oh, they do.
You're standing in a pulpit and it's all on us, right? And it's just like, take some time, have a seat, do what you got to do. Yeah. So I want to talk about healing. Mm-hmm. I feel, this is my personal feeling, there is a saying that says time heals all wounds. I do not believe that.
I agree.
I believe that time is a component of healing. However, I believe that without being intentional about taking care of your stuff, healing will not happen. How important do you think being intentional about your healing? Because all too often we take the initiative to get into a relationship, but we don't take the initiative to heal after we've been hurt or before we hurt other people, right? So like, how important is that even before the person?
So, all right, y'all buckle your seatbelts. So here's gonna be a lot of information you probably don't want to know.
I'm ready.
Right. I believe accountability leads to healing, right? Accountability and a mission. That's what's gonna lead to healing. At 5 years old, I was molested by an older boy cousin, right? So from 7 to 9, I thought it was normal for boys to kiss on boys, right? I even had an uncle who would tell me I thought you were gonna be gay, whatever. Thank the Lord that was never a struggle, right, as I got older. But that opened up that opened up a door to curiosities and sexual behaviors, not with men, but just in general. That should have never been opened that early. My first 3 sexual experiences were with married women in my dad's church. They were older and I was underage.
I'm not shocked by that. That's what I'm not shocked.
Right. They were older. I was underage. I never had to pursue. They pursued me. Right. So there's three violations of God's covenant already under the belt. Right.
Right.
So,
and this is before you get married.
Before I get married.
Okay.
Marriage 1 lasts 4 years. I caught her in the act of cheating with an ex there. So I have this issue, even now, I have this issue about exes and my spouse having contact. Thank God she doesn't have that issue. So there was a cheating there with that ex.
Right.
Marriage number 2, cheating there with that ex a week after we got married, right?
Yeah.
So marriage 3, cheating with an ex. I slept with 3 married women. Now I've been married 3 times and all 3 cheated with exes, right? It wasn't until I went to counseling with that counseling after the 3rd, to where I had to get to a place to where I felt like that's what I deserved because of what I did.
So you were indirectly finding the same woman over and over and over again.
Exactly right. Because that was what I defined or I thought was the norm in marriage. There were certain characteristics that I was drawn to. And so I had to get to a place after marriage 3 and say, why am I attracted to this type of woman?
Right.
And when you don't take accountability. Now, let me say this. Marriage 1, I was good, I behaved. Marriage 2, I was good, I behaved. By marriage 3, listen, now after this cheating, I'm gonna cheat too. No lie.
Now listen, okay, so then take me here. Now listen, wait. You got something to say?
I lost y'all, come back. I'm sorry, I'm still saved. I love the Lord.
No, they all right.
Been delivered, okay.
This is the real stuff here. No, this is real, because let me tell you something. I think a lot of times, and I'm not gonna lie to you, we feel like we all have it together, right? We know we don't, right? That's part of the false advertisement. We know we don't, but we have a tendency to put hierarchy on sin.
Yeah.
If I don't sin like him, then I'm good.
Right.
Or if nobody, I'm sorry, I just got a question. Yes, I'll ask that question. Yeah. If nobody knows about my sin, then, I don't really have to address it.
Right.
Right?
Right.
So I'm going to ask you a question in a second, but I want to ask you this first.
Okay.
When looking at that, I have found the same person over and over and over again. And to be clear, that's not abnormal. It happens a lot.
Right.
Right? Same person, different skin tone, different hair, same person over and over. The first time you get that person, you have to go, dang, I can't believe I got that person. The second time you get that person, you have to say, wait a minute. This might be me, right? There might be something in me that is seeking out this type of person. So when you were in counseling, when did you get to the place where you were like, okay, I might have something to do with this? And then what process did they take you through to recognize those traits in another person?
So for me, so let me say what led to counseling for me. So third marriage, and I'll never forget this. This counselor, he meets with me and my wife at that time, and says, well, listen, we're going to do some counseling, we're going to do some talking, and we're going to see if God wants you both to stay together. And I got an attitude. What do you mean we're going to see if God? What kind of Christian counselor are you? Of course God wants us to stay together. And I was offended. And then, things fell off and I ended up going by myself. The moment that led me to realizing it might be me is when I stopped blaming them for my hurt. So when I stopped overlooking what I did, right, and admitted maybe I've contributed to this, right? When I realized that maybe the cheating was a byproduct of me being too much into church. Wow. Maybe the cheating was a byproduct of me not asking, are you happy? Maybe me cheating was not paying attention to when they said, I didn't want this. This is not what I wanted for my life, right? So maybe I needed to take some accountability for those decisions or overlooking their needs, right? Then I can't blame them. The moment I tell you, it was like a light switch went off. The moment I've stopped saying or talking about how I blamed her and how I lost 280 members because of her and this, that, and the other, and I said, but you know what? This is kind of my fault. Yeah. It was like in that moment, when that moment hit, I realized that I needed to go back and do some healing. I need to go back and realize that, one, everybody makes mistakes. Two, everybody has flesh. Three, you don't always know what the things are, things in their background that's contributing to that behavior, right? So once I stopped being mad at them, I could actually understand them. I could understand them. And that's what helped me heal.
So I have a question. It says, how many couples did you have to look to and mentor during that time?
So in that season, I didn't mentor anybody because I didn't trust my own choices. Okay. And that's just to be honest. I didn't mentor anybody. There may have been one couple that came to me for premarital counseling. And in that scenario, it was actually the best time to come to me because I could tell them what to watch out for. Right. I couldn't tell you how to make it work, but I could tell you how to make it fail. So I was able to have them talk about things that they needed to pay attention to as they go into this decision. But in those areas, and I believe most preachers will be honest, at least for me, I don't preach on stuff that I'm struggling with. I'm not doing that. So, I ain't gonna preach about marriage.
Why not? I know, because let me tell you something. Let's just be clear. We talking real here, okay? We all know preachers that are the whores of Babylon, so they not gonna preach on fornication, right? Because they might want to hit you up when the message over. Like, they're not gonna do that, right? So they can't shoot you that text if they just preached about it, because you might mess around and get convicted. Why is that?
Because if you're not, because if you preach on struggle, the struggle begins to show itself, right? The struggle shows itself. And so you have no power behind what you're preaching. Paul says, I'm not ashamed of the gospel, for it is the power of God into salvation. But when your flesh is wrapped up in a particular issue, the flesh begins to show and there's no power. So nobody's getting delivered anyway, right? Because now you're preaching from a place of struggle. You don't get victory talking about your struggle. You get victory talking about how you beat it.
Okay, but Fitz, then why isn't the process to say, let me stop working on this struggle, right? I mean, we know that everything that's good to you is not good for you.
I think it's because we become afraid of what we might lose in the process. So if I stop preaching while I struggle, I might lose whatever ground I've gained, right? But if I focus on the preaching and stop the struggle, I might lose that personal enjoyment that I'm afraid I may not get again either, right? Because we're really dealing with both sides of who we are. Because no matter how much of a minister you are, there is a man or a woman behind that. We see it over and over in the Bible, whether it was David, whether it was Noah, whether it was even Solomon. For Solomon to be the wisest man in the world and still have a woman problem and give in the idol gods, that lets us know how big that struggle is.
I just talked about this. Okay, listen, I gotta say it because I just talked about this. What I don't understand, and you help me understand because you got all the testosterone in the conversation right now. If you look at the word of God, every man with wisdom and money, God said to Solomon, because you asked for wisdom, I will give you everything. But watch that strange woman, and David, Solomon, his daddy had the same problem, right? So generational curses are not new, right? They've been passed down since the Bible. You would think that men of influence, let's just be honest, 2019 alone was a year that God was snatching skeletons out of every closet. We saw way too much of a lot of men of God last year. What is it that says, you know what, this is not going to go that way for me, even though we see consistently throughout history, throughout the Bible, in the church now, you constantly see pastors being outed for infidelity, and yet they all still think they won't be crossed. And it's not just pastors, it's men in general. But my question is, why isn't the go-to, let me deal with that flesh problem? Because don't you then limit the freedom of your people if you're not addressing things just because you're going through it?
I believe it's because we haven't created a safe space for them to do that. We've not created a safe space.
Okay.
So even for me, when I got to a place, so my divorce, my third divorce was very public and very messy. So I had 3 daycares. I was making $500,000 a year. We had 11,000 square foot of church. We had 300 members weekly, one of the fastest growing churches we hear. And this is my second launch.
Right.
When I got to a place where I said, I'm done, we were legally separated, did not tell the church because we didn't want to lose the people in the church.
Right.
I had my own house. She was staying in the big house. She had the daycares, right? She was doing what she was doing. I was doing who I was doing. You got me? You hear what I'm saying?
Yes, sir. I got you.
That's what we were doing.
Right.
And when I said, you know what, though, I don't want to do this anymore. And I said, we got to tell the church. We got to tell the church. She was like, well, give me a second so I can get some stuff in order. We'll do it. Come to find out, there were conversations being had without me knowing with some of the church people.
So they kind of already knew.
So she had told some people already. And, that's neither here nor there. Nothing negative. She's happy. I'm happy. Thank the Lord. But in that season, when I tell you everything was pulled from under me, everything. And it's my fault because I shouldn't have did what I did. Should have been 100 up front. But I lost every pastor friend I had. Even my covering said, you should just step down, leave it alone. You don't want the negative publicity. What I needed in that season was somebody to cover me, not kick me out. Right? The other preachers who I knew had babies outside of their marriage, they didn't even want to deal with me. I know what you got, but you don't want to. So when I tell you I lost my entire preacher circle, I didn't understand. And I know all y'all stuff. And so I realized it's because we will not be transparent about where we've been that people don't feel safe about being honest. And then when we are honest, you get the preachers who say, well, if you're going to cheat, do it out of state. That's the kind of stuff people would tell me. That's not what I needed in that season. I needed some covering. You can cover a gift without condoning a sin.
Absolutely.
But the church has not mastered that yet. We've not mastered the process of restoration. What church do you know has a written process of restoration? Nobody. How do we restore? What does that look like? How long does that take? What are the indicators we're looking for? What kind of lifestyle change do you want? We do not have that. That's something that I created at my church because I want you to know that if you follow this process, we will restore you where you were with oversight, but we will restore you because that's what the Bible says we should do. And I think that until we create safe spaces, you can't be transparent because as much as people say they want transparency, they can't handle it.
Right.
And we see the biblical examples for that. Noah's two sons walked backwards because they didn't want to see their father uncovered. Our problem in today's church is that everybody wants everything uncovered.
Oh yeah, we have Christian gossip columnists now,
and a lot of Christians follow them.
Right, and a lot of church people following them, right? Like,
and it's the truth. And and what's funny, and this is what's crazy. Do you know you will never find one biblical example of a leader who willingly was uncovered to his people by choice?
Right.
Even Jesus. Remember when Jesus was in the garden and says, God, if this cup could pass from me, guess what? He was by himself. He left the disciples behind in a place they could not see him. Said, won't you pray with me? So that means he was already struggling. But when he gets to God, he's by himself and says, can you please let this cup pass from me? When Jesus was tempted in the wilderness, he was by himself. When Elijah was struggling with suicide, he was by himself. Right. People who follow us are not wired to handle seeing our struggle. They can't handle
it. Okay, wait a minute. So let's talk about that. Mm-hmm. Because the truth of the matter is there's a level of reverence that we want to have for our leaders that they need that, right? Because in their minds, they won't mean to, but they make you celestial. My pastor and God have dinner together, right? He's in the shower, him and God are talking.
Hold on.
I think you're frozen.
Okay, I can
hear you. Can you hear me? Okay. So as a rule, parishioners have a tendency to make their leaders celestial. You know, him and God are, talking in the shower. He's driving down the street. God's telling him to turn left or right. That's my pastor. And I find that, especially and I'm not saying all churches because all churches are not like that, but you have to know the people you lead. And you know that there are going to be some people that are not going to seek God for themselves, even though you've taught them to. Application of the word of God is still a struggle in the church. Mm-hmm. So then when you fall, they leave God because you fail.
To this day, I know people who do not go to church anymore because of my divorce with my last church. To this day. And
how do you grapple with
that? That right there, I'm always mindful of that in everything I do going forward. Not that I even have a desire to do nothing stupid because God's been really good to me. But I understand the scriptures when it talks about blood being on your hands. And that's something I have to keep before God because I'm accountable for that. I am accountable for that. And so it makes me want to live a life to where my good can't be evil spoken of. But it's also taught me how to keep enough distance between myself and the people, right? To where I don't become so common or even allow myself to be elevated too high. And I remind them, I am a man just like you. I just have a different assignment. And I think that if we took away the hierarchy in church as far as I'm better than you, but really my role is just different. I just have a role, so do you. We're all part of the same body. If we can give people that particular type of perspective, I think we would be less likely to be idolized.
Yeah. Okay. Fitz, I could talk to you all night. I could, but listen, I want to make sure that they can get some questions in, and then I'm gonna leave you with a little exercise at the end that I want you to kind of give me some hierarchy of importance on. So right now, I want you guys, if you have questions for Fitz, please type them in the chat box now so that I can pose some questions to him. We shall wait for you.
And nothing's off limits, y'all. Y'all can ask me anything.
You can ask Fitz anything. He's going to answer it.
You really can.
You really can.
You really can.
I promise.
Yeah.
Let's see what I got. Okay, is it too late to begin again if I've entered into a marriage or a relationship with someone who is not whom I thought they were?
It's too late to begin again. So to be clear, then I need to know: are you saying begin again with that person, or are you saying
like I'm married?
Okay.
And I've realized that there were things I thought about them that are not accurate, right? And is it too late for us to be able to rebuild that?
Absolutely not. I think, the scripture says, how can two walk together except they be agreed? I believe that if you can come to a place of agreement, and that is only going to be through effective communication. I always recommend that communication not happen in an argument. Don't wait till y'all fight, till you're like, you ain't who you said you were. No, don't do that. But have a nice dinner, go out and say, hey, you know what I realized, we're a little bit, and people change as they grow. You know what I'm saying? So, having those conversations about what is it that they need from you, and then for you to exchange what is it that you need from them, to where this a mutual conversation, right? And making sure that both needs are being met. I've realized that if I meet my wife's needs, she has no problem meeting mine, right?
That's
because
good.
We want to please each other. So we have to make sure we're doing our part that creates the environment that makes them want to reciprocate. So I don't think it's ever too late. As long as there is agreement, it's not too late. If there's not agreement, then you ask God to change their heart to where the ground can be right for you to plant the right seeds.
Absolutely. Okay. So I got two questions. So how old is Fitz now?
I'll be 37 on July 1st.
And then do you have custody of all four of your children, and are they all from the first wife?
So my wife now has one. He'll be 19 July 30th. We call him Buddha. So he'll be 19 July 30th. He's actually getting ready to go to the Navy. And then my 16, my daughter turned 14 yesterday, and I have a son who's 13. And they are with my ex-wife. I only have kids with one woman. After that experience, I didn't want no more.
You were done.
I'm done.
Right.
And so we have them 50-50. So that is very interesting navigation, because she lives with her partner, and her and her partner have been together longer than almost any of my marriages. So they've been together like 9 years.
Wow.
Learning how to navigate that and teach them how to respect her as a person, despite the lifestyle, has been an interesting experience, but it's taught me how to treat all people.
Absolutely. And then, so you're 37 now.
I'll be 37 July 1st.
What is 37-year-old Fitz wanting to tell 19-year-old Fitz that's about to get married?
You have no idea what you're getting yourself into. I would have told myself to wait, because I hadn't discovered purpose yet. I wasn't walking in purpose yet. My understanding about the prerequisites for marriage are completely different now than they were at 19. I didn't know what you were supposed to have in order first, right? But when you go back and read Genesis 1, 2, and 3, God literally shows us what Adam had to have and set up first. If I had to did that, I wouldn't have got married then.
When you were 19, I read in your book that you said that you always wanted to be married, right? So, I mean, you stood up and you gave all these wonderful occupations, right? And then the last thing, I think you said you wanted to be a preacher. Then you said, and I want to be married, like when you were career day, right? Yep. You're 19 years old. Is any of that influence to marry what, I won't say the initials, but certain church denominations champion married preachers over unmarried preachers? Was there ever a pressure to make sure you got married so that you would thrive in your ministry as well?
I believe so. I know at least for coaching at that time, it's different now. But at that time, when did I get ordained? 03, 02. You couldn't get ordained unless you were married. They would not ordain single preachers. And I had been licensed for like 3 years already. So they would not ordain single preachers. So you had to be married first. That was just part of the process. So I do believe that you are better received. You're better received by the church if you are a married preacher. You're better received by single women if you're an unmarried preacher. So.
Right. And sometimes you're better received by single women if you're a married preacher.
Very true.
Yeah. Right? Amen. Amen. Right. Let's keep it all the way 100. Everybody, coming down for prayer ain't wanting the same laying on of the hands.
Yep.
So then how do you say, How do you say, what do you say to the man who he's young, he's married, he's got a family, he's living for the Lord, right? And he's up against this pressure, because I feel like there's two types of pressure, right? Number one, women are more attracted to married men. Not all women, but some women are more attracted to married men because, and this is just my experience on my platform with the single women I've spoken to, they already know that you're capable of committing, right? So it's a lot easier to come and get somebody married than it is to go and find somebody single, because somebody single is not proven to have the ability to commit.
Yeah.
How often did you see that? You know, you're out there, you're preaching, you're teaching, you're whatever, and you're not even preaching or teaching, you're at the gym, and they see a ring, right?
Yeah.
It's, oh, you're such a wonderful speaker, okay?
Yeah.
Meanwhile, Lady Ray is like, you don't talk that good. You know, you got your face.
You know, and what's funny is she's my biggest fan. I usually, you know, the way I combat that, the first thing I used to tell them is my wife is crazy. Don't do it. No. Usually, so in my, I think it's either in this book or it's in the 31-day dating guide, where I talk about boundaries. Boundaries are so important, right? Boundaries are everything when it comes to protecting your salvation, protecting the perception of your salvation, right? You can control your integrity behind closed doors, but your reputation, you can't. That's what people say. And so I've learned how to do certain things in certain ways to protect myself from that. So, you know, majority of my ministry is 80% women, right? 80%. It used to be 90, but I lost about 30 of them when I got married.
Right. Amen.
So, right. So I realized.
You should be first lady, you know? Yeah.
Listen, and I wasn't even looking for one. I realized that now everything I do, I just include her, right? And my wife she ain't no prophetess, she ain't no preacher. She has a good gift of discernment. She's not praise and worship. She ain't doing none of that. She likes to be in the background, but I include her on everything. The best way to dispel that is you have somebody there to keep everybody accountable. It ain't saying you struggle. I ain't struggling with it, but she's going to be right there. If they want counsel, guess who's going to be right there?
That's right. Absolutely.
You know why? Because they talk different when they know my wife is sitting right there and you on speakerphone. Listen
to me. Do you understand what I'm saying to you? Absolutely. Okay, I got another message. Right. Brett said, if someone will leave one person for someone else, you know, leave their marriage, what makes you think that they won't leave you too? That's actually proven behavior, right?
It's proven behavior, and it's also proven that the side chick then has a complex that it's going to happen. So that actually contributes to it actually happening.
Right. So you both can never truly trust each other because you walk in being dishonest. You've stated a foundation of dishonesty.
Yep. So now so this is what's crazy. Believe it or not, and I ain't gonna tell you how I know. Believe it or not, the preacher usually doesn't marry the side chick because he thinks that's her character anyway. You mess with anybody.
Come on, that's not shocking.
So then why would I marry you? You didn't care that I was married, so how can I trust you, right?
Right.
That you wouldn't do it to me, right? So they never do that, right? And a matter of fact, if they end up getting a divorce because of them, they're definitely not marrying you because they're going to think that their ministry is ruined because you were the cause, even though it's their choice. You were the cause, or you were the mechanism for that ministry to break down.
And you do mention that in your book. You say it's a company versus companionship, right?
Exactly right. Exactly.
Absolutely.
You got to be able to identify the difference.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, we're getting ready to go, but I want to do this one exercise with you. I just want to get your first reaction. And so below there are some, I have some guidelines for ideal relationships, right?
Okay.
And so I want you to, I'm going to read them to you, and I want you to give me, on a scale of 1 to 10, I want you to give me what you think their importance is.
Okay.
Okay? First one.
Okay, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Do you have a question?
So on a scale of 1 to 10,
10 being the you got to have it, and 1's like, eh.
Okay, gotcha.
Okay,
gotcha.
Good communication.
Okay, good. 10.
Trust.
10.
Love.
9.
9, okay.
9.
Acceptance.
10.
Being friends first.
Double 10. 20.
35. Okay.
20.
Good sex.
7.
Mutual respect. That'll be a new episode, but anyway, mutual respect.
Yeah, please, because
we gotta talk about that one. Okay. Mutual respect.
Mutual respect, I will put at an 8.
8. Attraction, physical.
7.
Okay. Attraction, mental.
7.
Okay. Common interests.
5.
Okay. Sacrifice for the other.
9.
Okay. Investing time in the relationship.
10.
Making the relationship your highest priority.
10.
Loyalty.
10.
Honesty.
10.
Being non-judgmental.
10.
Forgiveness.
55. 55.
So I want to ask you this one question. This is my final question, which is, I said in one of my lives one day that in order to be married, you have to be willing to forgive often. How true is that statement?
I think it is probably the truest thing that you could probably say. I tell people this: don't get married if you have a deal breaker. If you have a deal breaker, don't get married. And the only reason why I say that is because marriage is supposed to emulate the relationship that God has with us, that Christ has with the church. And if you have deal breakers, that means you do not emulate that relationship, because with God, there are no deal breakers. He will never throw us away. He will always forgive. So if you go into a marriage preconceived that if he cheat, I'm done. If she cheat, I'm done. Don't get married. Don't. And I get it. Nobody wants that, right? Nobody's looking for that. But if you
Jesus.
Right. If you go in with a deal breaker,
yeah,
it's not emulating the love of Christ.
Wow. Fitz. This has been awesome, and we gotta do it again. We gotta do it again. Fitz may or may not be doing my Relationships RX conference. We're gonna talk about that. But listen, I have appreciated the time. Thank you so much for availing yourself to give of your time. You guys, Fitz's book is available on Amazon now. All of his products, the dating guide and his personal book, the relationships book, is actually Real Relationships. Real is real big. But that is all available on Amazon. You can get it. This will rebroadcast on Facebook and YouTube tomorrow. Fitz, I can't begin to tell you how much I appreciate you. Do you have a final thought?
Final thought. Marry for marriage, right? God didn't create marriage for ministry, because there was no ministry at the time that he created it. And so we always have to remember that when God instituted marriage, it was about the union of the man and the woman. Anytime we try to make it about anything beyond that, anytime we try to make it hyper spiritual, we've missed the point of why God designed marriage. God says in the garden, it's not good for man to be alone. And I always wondered, why would God say that if he walked with Adam in the garden daily? Before Eve shows up, the Bible says that God walked with Adam in the garden daily. In the cool of the day, God was there. So that means Adam and God talked every day. They had a relationship every day. They had a spiritual connection. You can't get any closer to God if he's walking with you in the garden. And God still said it's not good for him to be alone, which means that walk alone wasn't enough to fulfill some needs that Adam had in his real human life. So we have to understand that marriage was about the union of two people, not about this spiritual ministry, not about all this extra stuff that we try to make marriage about. Had nothing to do with that, because the church didn't exist yet. So we marry for marriage. We marry to emulate how God loves the church. If I could say anything else, that's what I want people to remember.
Well, thank you so much, Fitz. Thank you so much for your time. Thank all of you for coming to be with me, Lisa Dannielle After Dark. You guys are dope. I love you. And we will be back next week with Pastor Cliff Clark. I forgot his last name. Cliff Clark. Next week, we'll be right here. Thank you, guys. I love you guys. And have a great evening. Hello, lovelies. I hope that you enjoyed this video. Do not forget that you can join us every week, 9 p.m. Central Standard Time. And all you have to do is email me at contact@lisadannielle.com. I'll put the information down below. Feel free to email me and I'll make sure that you get the Zoom code. Be kind, be intentional, be prepared, and don't forget, I believe in you. Now it's time for you to believe in yourself. Take care.